This is Duke University.
And so the Twitter question is, does it really do any good to boycott BP gas stations right now? Larry Crowder, let's start with you. Are you buying gas from BP? What's your recommendation?
I think that after Exxon Valdez, there was a huge campaign to boycott Exxon to try to encourage that company to be more responsible corporate citizens. I think there's a similar thing likely to happen with BP, where people question whether they want to be purchasing their gas from BP. One of the complications is a lot of gas stations that you drive by are not corporate BP stations, but they're run by people in your local community who run those businesses. And so boycotting BP may have a smaller effect on BP than it has in your local community by the owner of that gas station market sort of the thing that you're at. The other thing that people need to understand is that the distribution system for petroleum in the United States involves distribution of petroleum from wherever it's taken in the U.S. or internationally through a very complicated marketing system where individual companies like BP finish off their product with additives and things like that, but a lot of the refined gasoline comes through a very main pipeline. So I think rather than, I welcome people to boycott BP. What they ought to be rethinking is their use of energy in their homes, in their cars. How do they get from one place to another? I think that's the challenge that we face. In fact, my view is everybody that uses gasoline is complicit in this crisis in some way.
Tim Profeta, do you fill up at BP?
Let me pick up right where Larry left off. I think BP is part of a complex economic sector and clearly has a great deal of culpability here, but also is part of an oil sector in which it could happen to many different corporations. I think what people should be doing is trying to figure out how we can move beyond the use of petroleum. Because there is this great cost of using petroleum that we don't see every day. It's not on your credit card bill, but it's in the air, it's in the cleanup of the Gulf, and it's in the price it takes us to protect our interests in the Middle East. And we have to find a way to get that cost into our decision making. If we could ever successfully do that, I assure you, petroleum would not be the way we'd want to power our transportation sector in the United States. So I would counsel people to try and move away from petroleum, not just BP. I think it's actually an interesting question about BP is that BP has long been thought of as the most progressive green company. It was always BP, but beyond petroleum. And they still do have some very interesting policy pushes towards renewables and great investments across what people think about green technologies. So you have a company that's taken a kind of a green stance, but now has had a horrible safety record. So in one part, they've done well. One part, they've clearly created one of the environmental disasters of our generation. How do you balance that? And the last thing I'd say is to the degree that a boycott of BP would lead to the dissolution of BP and maybe the bankruptcy of BP, it's not clear that that benefits the Gulf of Mexico.
So it's the better thing to do, go to BP so they have the money to clean up.
Well, I think you should probably go to the place you've been going to for all the other reasons, and then think about using less gasoline, not being complicit in the use of petroleum by the United States economy, and think about what we need to do as a government and a country to move beyond this petroleum dependence we have.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.